ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to today's GIC Talk. I'm the new volunteer of the GIC Talk. A few days ago, I saw one news that among 34 OECD countries, Korea ranks 32nd on happiness. Although technology made our life conveniently, it didn't actually make us happy. So I think it is a little sad. Anyway, before enjoying today's GIC Talk, please make sure that your cell phones have been turned off or switched to silent mode. Today, the speaker is going to talk about what mental health science tells us. Progress in economic, social, and educational development have brought both benefits and stresses for people in this society. Anyway, these days, maintaining one's mental health has become an important role in society. This talk will briefly summarize research findings and several research theories and techniques to improve individual mental health. This talk will be given by Daniel Olympia. So let's give him a big hand.
Well, thank you very much for, first of all, for the wonderful welcome. Annyeonghaseyo. I'm pleased to be here. For some of you that are regulars here, you may have come last year. I was asked to give a talk, and I really enjoyed myself. But some people may not have been there at that time. I'd like to give people a little bit of a description of my background. This is my third summer in Gwangju at Cheonan National University. I've been invited there as part of international faculty. The summer program there has been a great source of enjoyment for me. When I go back to my regular job, I am a professor in the University of Utah, where right now it is very hot and dry. There I was telling my wife about my talk, and I said, it's always relative depending upon where you are. In Utah, it's 103 degrees, which is about 37 degrees Celsius. Hot. And I said, here it's wonderful rain. So it's very pleasant. In my job at the University of Utah, I work with graduate students to help them learn better ways of working with children with disabilities, children with autism, children with learning disabilities, children with behavior problems. And I have done this probably working for at least 20 years in the American public education system. And for the last 13 years or so, I've been a professor. Not a bad life. Okay. I want to, a little bit about me. First, I want to thank you all, and especially thank Dr. Shin, the Dean of International Studies at Cheonan National University. Some of you may know that Dr. Shin is retiring from the university.
One semester.
Yes. And it makes me sad. Maybe he's happy. We're talking about happiness. I think he has, been a very big source of inspiration for me because I have enjoyed talking with him and watching him work on the campus at Cheonan. The good thing is, I think that he's continuing to be very active and to be involved in the GIC activities, and so that is a very good thing. They may have more time. They'll ask you to do more. You better watch out. I also want to thank the staff and the faculty at Cheonan National University, Shinye Khan, and other people who work there for helping us be comfortable at the university, the GIC staff for making me feel welcome this afternoon, and for all of you for coming. As they say, Saturday afternoon in the United States, usually people just sit down in front of the TV set and watch sports somewhere in the world. So I thank you for coming. My interest in South Korea has been fairly recent. Many years ago, I was in Japan for a short period of time, and that was my only experience with countries in Asia, Southeast Asia. But in education, we notice lots of things. And one of the things that I have always sort of been very impressed with in South Korea is the performance and the educational motivation of South Korean students. Every time I look at a survey with South Korean students are the highest or the next to the highest in science and math. And this is a goal that the United States has. Right now, I think the United States is about 13 or 14.
Yeah, quite low.
Quite well. I'm sorry to say. And so I felt even 3 years ago that we could learn something by coming here and looking at how South Korean students learn and what causes them to be so strong in some of these areas. Now, as you know, in the United States, sometimes we are frustrated with our educational system. I think we sometimes have 60%, 70% of our students drop out of school still. After all of the efforts in the last 10 or 15 years, this is still something that concerns us. If you look at South Korea, very small dropout rate. I think South Korea maybe graduates 96, 97, 98% of the students who start. Okay? It's also impressive as I spent more time here to look at all of the technology, all of the accomplishments. Dr. Shin and his program, they do a good job of showing us around the country. And so having visited some of the different activities in South Korea, very impressive for someone just kind of, here for a very short period of time. I think this is also particularly impressive when I think about the experience of South Korea after the Korean War. I have a good friend of mine who is served in the American military in the Korean War. And he and I have talked about his experiences here. He talked about the devastation that was in the country. And so when I think about things like positive psychology, I think about resiliency. How people come back, how they're able to overcome adversity. And some of the information that I've looked at tells me that it was very difficult to be living in South Korea in the 1950s. And so many of you, maybe you have your parents or your grandparents. You can remember some of those difficulties. And how, maybe even remembering how people overcame some of those obstacles. I think currently, we see, South Korea as a truly modern society, one that is very strong in education, technology, science, all of those areas. So my area is psychology, okay? And I'm a psychologist. I work with children. For 20 years, I worked with children who had problems. Every day, many problems would come to my door, okay? And this has really been sort of how American psychology has operated, always looking at deficits. The science of psychology began by looking at problems, things like depression, suicide, problems that got people into difficulty, okay, and caused much unhappiness. In the last 10 years or so, in the United States in particular, I think we've been looking at a different side of psychology, okay? We're looking at human potential. What makes people strive to overcome obstacles? What allows an individual to overcome adversity? What about things like virtues? How do people use their virtues or their strengths to overcome adversity? This is very interesting to me as a psychologist. I find now that when I go out and give talks, people are always more interested in hearing about what makes people happy, what makes people adjusted. Okay, how do people overcome adversity? We focus on how people apply individual strengths. And this has been a subject of scientific study for the last 10, 15 years or so. I think we pay attention to subjective experiences. So how people think about the past. Okay, gratitude is a very important factor in subjective well-being, as we're coming to find out. How grateful people feel for opportunities in their life, or how grateful they feel for people that have helped them along the way. I'm sure everybody in this room, if you think for a minute about someone who has been inspirational for you. It could be a mother, it could be a father, it could be a mentor. I know I've talked with many students of Dr. Shin's who feel like, well, he's been an inspiration to me. Okay? And they feel great gratitude when they get encouragement from their mentors, including Dr. Shin. Okay? We also look at our experiences in the present. So things like flow. Flow is a term used to describe an experience that people really enjoy doing. That you have a lot of investment in a flow experience. Some of the science that we've looked at in the last 15 years points out that people who have flow experiences are really applying their strengths to something that they really enjoy doing simply for the sake of doing it. Okay? If you like to garden, does anybody here like to work in the garden? I do. I have my tomatoes back home. I watch over them very carefully. And so it gives me great pleasure to watch them grow. Okay? And when I'm kind of working in my tomato garden, it's like, the phone rings, I don't hear it. It just goes right over my head. Okay? Sometimes at work, we have flow experiences. I think sometimes people who are surfing the web, the internet, you have a flow experience because time stops. You look at your watch and you say, where did the time go? We also have this element of thinking about the future. People who have reason to hope have a sense of optimism about life and the world. We know that there are many people in the world that don't have a lot of hope. Sometimes, it's because of where they live or the government, or they might feel like they don't have any opportunities to improve themselves. In the United States, I worry about college students who sometimes they don't have any hope that they can finish college because it costs so much money to attend college in the United States. And more students are getting shut out of college. So they despair. They don't have optimism. And we have Occupy Wall Street. Okay? I don't know if there was an Occupy Seoul. Was there an Occupy Seoul movement? I don't know if, I haven't heard of one. Yes.
Small scale.
Yeah, or Occupy Gwangju. That's, we're thinking about people's sense of optimism and hope for the future. We also want to think about individual strengths. People who are unaware of their individual strengths. If they're in a job or if they're in a situation that doesn't allow them to use their strengths, they become unhappy. Okay, they don't have a good sense of subjective well-being. Right now, I'm talking in front of you. I enjoy this. Believe it or not, I enjoy this. And I enjoy being social. My job as a psychologist requires me to interact with a lot of people. And so when I look at my strengths, I think being social is one of them. Okay, for the most part. Sometimes I get a little grouchy, but for the most part I'm social. So we look at individual strengths. So this is also a way of looking at positive psychology. People who experience positive emotion, we call that the pleasant life. If you have lots of money, you can afford a good bottle of wine. Anybody like red wine here? I do. A good bottle of Italian Chianti is good. just a glass, okay, not a whole case, but just a glass. I enjoy those kinds of experiences. They generate a pleasant feeling. Positive character, the engaged one. I enjoy working at things that take advantage of my talents. Okay? So having good flow experiences, being engaged with what you're doing is one part of subjective well-being or happiness. The meaningful life, being involved with other people, is a very important part of happiness and subjective well-being. I think that many of the volunteers that work here at the GIC are working towards a meaningful life, because if you volunteer, you're giving up time for yourself. There are things that you're doing here that are important and that are appreciated by many other people. Okay? If you're offering classes in Korean, if you're offering classes in English, you offer advice to international students who come to Gwangju. They don't know where to go for, to have a good meal. And you have people like Warren. Is Warren works here?
He's a volunteer.
He's a volunteer?
Yes.
Warren is a volunteer. And so Warren takes people out to show them. So he is the meaningful life. Okay? I think Warren gets a lot of pleasure and satisfaction. It makes him feel good. I don't tell Warren that I was talking about him. Okay? But so each one of these is measurable. So we can actually look at levels of the pleasant life, the engaged life, the meaningful life for individuals. Okay? We can also improve them for ourselves. Okay? If we structure our thinking a little differently. This life satisfaction is actually made up of positive emotion, being engaged in activities that you enjoy, and your activities have meaning. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about happiness and flourishing. Okay? I'm going to show you something here this is something I'd like you to look at. Okay? If I do this, you lost it? Yeah.
You feel alive?
I feel happy of myself.
I'm just happy with myself too. What do you got, your words of wisdom? What about for all the other kids trying to learn how to ride a bike? Can you say anything to them?
That's my example of someone who is a little 5-year-old boy who is displaying many of the qualities of subjective well-being. And I'm going to talk about some of those now. Okay, but you can see he was very excited. He was enjoying what he was doing. He had positive emotion. I think when he was riding his bike, that was a flow experience for him. And he was encouraging other people, to not give up. If you don't succeed the first time, you keep going, and thumbs up, rock and roll. Okay. Whenever I show this to groups of people, everybody smiles. Okay. And I think it kind of resonates with people. So, it strikes a certain chord. So let's talk about subjective well-being. Okay, this little boy had a good example of subjective well-being. When we define subjective well-being, we talk about how people evaluate their own lives in their thinking and in their feelings. So, we can talk about how satisfied are you with life? Okay, and you don't have to answer me, but most days I'm pretty satisfied with my life. Okay, depending upon your job, where you live, those kinds of things also relate to subjective well-being. If you live, sometimes people who live in Los Angeles, they have lots of pollution in Los Angeles. So people don't like living in Los Angeles because it affects their sense of well-being. Okay? High levels of pleasant feelings. How much people get enjoyment out of life. Okay? And also low levels of unpleasant feelings. Being sad, angry, depressed. Okay? I think if you could think about even societies, that maybe have some of these characteristics. I think the last couple of months, we have a lot of people in the United States who are very angry. I'm not sure what they're angry at, but we call them the Tea Party. Okay? They're very unhappy with life, because you can describe this any one of a number of ways, but they're just not very happy. Okay? Whether it's justified or not, we can have our own opinions about that. But the question for psychologists is, what can we control in our life? Well, we know that half of our adjustment in life is related to genetics. Okay? How many people here are parents? You have children of your own? Yeah? You know about temperament. Okay? If you have a child who goes to bed easily, if she's unhappy, you can rock her, and pretty soon, say a couple of nice words, they're quiet. Okay? We call those easy babies. We have difficult babies who are difficult to satisfy. They are very unhappy sometimes with food. They have a difficult time adapting to change. Okay? And then we have the babies who are slow to warm up. Okay, this is basic psychology. We know that much of our temperament is inherited, and that we have not too much control over that. Okay? I think I was a happy baby when I was born. I think I have brothers and sisters that I think sometimes they were not too happy. Okay? And they had very difficult lives. They were always in some kind of crisis or turmoil. We also know that there are some things that we can control, our thoughts and our feelings and how we perceive things, or what kinds of activities we engage in. And I can choose to do something. Okay. We also have circumstances. Sometimes people are born into difficult environments. If you have if you go to a school that is not a very good school, okay, where the teachers are not very good, okay, that's circumstance. Okay. Some parents try to change circumstances. These are some of the causes of subjective well-being. So this is what we think makes people feel good about themselves. Okay? I've already mentioned personality and temperament. We have money. Always think, well, that always makes people happy. Okay? I was just shopping before I came here in the underground shopping area. There are many people down there shopping. Okay, buying things that will make them happy. At least that's what they think. Social comparison. How do I look next to my neighbor? Okay? If my neighbor has a brand new car and a big house, and I have a little car or no car and a very small house, I might feel unhappy. Okay, and there are a lot of things, where we compare ourselves to other people. We have universal needs, things like food, shelter, clothing, being involved with other people, social support. Okay, that affects happiness. How well people adapt to their circumstances, flexibility. Okay, can somebody who has a big accident, let's say they are mountain climbing and they fall, and then they become paralyzed. Well, that will affect their happiness. What about people who have bad marriage? Okay, sometimes that can affect happiness. What about people who lose a child? Okay, that can affect happiness. And then this person-environment fit. How well the environment matches up with you as an individual. Okay, so I want to talk about each of these quickly. Temperament studies. Okay, we know that identical twins who are raised apart are more similar in happiness than fraternal twins who are raised separately. Okay, so there's this strong genetic component. That's a pretty strong research finding. Personality traits. Okay, people who are extroverts tend to have more positive feelings. Extroverts, think about, I guess part of that is maybe temperament. The happy baby may be more of an extrovert, whereas the difficult baby may be more of an introvert, or the slow to warm up baby. Okay. Temperament causes subjective well-being. Partly. Okay, it's an influence. Okay. Some people say, well, you can't really change your height. You were born with a predisposition to be a certain height. But we know that there are certain things now that we can do that will modify or adjust for some of our temperament differences. Okay? Temperament and personality are important, but circumstances are even more important. How we adapt and how we deal with some of those circumstances. This is talking about money now. So this is a chart, and each of those little dots is a country. Okay? And on this axis, it shows kind of a composite of everyone who completed a survey put out by psychology researchers. Just asking people to assess their lives. South Koreans participated in this survey, by the way. Okay? And you look at national income. You can see there's a pretty good relationship with money. Okay? So you would think, well, the more money you make, the happier you are. However, there's a big if here. When we look at the change in income at different income levels, okay, you can see right about here, okay, income becomes less important. So people who make an awful lot of money, okay, it doesn't necessarily contribute to their overall level of happiness. all by itself. Okay, so money alone is not the only deciding factor in terms of subjective well-being. Even though we have many people who pursue money for just because they think it will make them more happy. I was walking by the campus last night, and I saw the most expensive sports car I've ever seen anywhere, even in the United States. It was a very brand new, I think it must have been a Lamborghini, Italian sports car. He was racing down the road. And I'm thinking, boy, I wonder if he's happy. Well, I'm not sure, but money by itself does not produce happiness or subjective well-being. When we look at enjoyment, not just subjective well-being, but if we look at enjoyment, having positive feelings, it's a mixed picture. Okay, there's a little bit more variability. It's not a linear relationship anymore. Okay. What predicts enjoyment? Learning new things, having support of others, and using one's skills. Those are three qualities of subjective that contribute to subjective well-being. So you can be wealthy, but if you are learning new things, okay. I think of people like Steve Jobs, the inventor of Apple, the iPhone. Okay, I know he's passed away, but he was a very wealthy man. And I think even though he was wealthy, he continued to learn new things. Okay? He had some people who were very supportive of him, some people who found that he was very difficult to work with. That he was also using his skills. Okay? He never really stopped. Even though he was a person that had tremendous wealth. Okay? When we look at money, now there is something that might interest you. Okay? We have income and subjective evaluation. Here we have two countries. Costa Rica, probably a very poor country. Here we have South Korea. They're both up here, okay? They evaluate themselves well, okay, but there are some big differences. It's maybe more surprising to look at Costa Rica. Okay, so let's take a look. Here we have Costa Rica, gross income per person. South Korea is fairly recent data, $46,500. Costa Rica, 1/4 that amount, only 25%. Okay, we look at life satisfaction. South Korea has not as much satisfaction. Okay, that could be for a variety of reasons. I'll explain that in just a minute. South Korea, they do acknowledge positive feelings, but not as much as Costa Rica. So what's going on in Costa Rica? Okay. So here is results of the survey. In South Korea, 36% of the people responding to a survey said they're really not respected very much. In Costa Rica, a smaller percentage. Without social support. Okay. Well, 20% is only 1/5 of the population. Okay. But Costa Rica is 8%. Okay. Not satisfied with the standard of living. 33%. Okay. Costa Rica, 19%. Not satisfied with the job. 27 and 9. Well, Costa Rica has a very different economy. Okay, there are maybe some things that are happening in Costa Rica, where people are not as stressed out by some of the expectations. I'm thinking, when I saw that sports car go past the university, I was thinking of all the South Korean people that said, I want one like that. Okay? They said, I want a car just like that. If I don't have a car like that, I won't be happy. I think in Costa Rica, if you saw a car like that go by, you would think, are they lost? Or did they, I'm not sure. There may not be that sense of consumerism. I think that is there in Costa Rica. And we all like a good, strong economy, but sometimes that creates stresses for individuals. We know money matters, but other things matter as well. Okay? Money ceases to become important after a certain threshold. Okay, let's look at social comparison. How you compare to your neighbors. Okay? In terms of life satisfaction, generally the more people make, the more satisfied they feel. Okay? But if you compare yourself to your neighbors, it's not as strong a relationship. They 0.17. Okay? Even controlling for absolute income, it drops down to 0.11. Okay? So, if you're comparing yourself to people that are in your circle of friends or people that you work with or where you live, okay, if there's a big disparity, you might feel a little unsatisfied or unhappy. Okay, but there are other things that affect happiness. One thing that's very important to remember, I think, is that the internet has changed a lot of how people compare themselves to others. I was talking with my wife this morning, and she said, she was telling me about one of her girlfriends who is working in Taiwan. And the girlfriend in Taiwan, she's an American, but she was watching the Kardashians. Do you know the Kardashians? It's an American reality show about young people with lots of money. Okay? And they were watching it in Taiwan. And I'm thinking, if they're watching the Kardashians in Taiwan, people might begin to think, I want to be just like the Kardashians in the United States. Okay, so the internet has a very big influence on how people view themselves. I think, you've heard of the Arab Spring in the Middle East. Much unrest and I think unhappiness. I think part of that may be that people in those countries like Tunisia and Egypt, they look at themselves and they see the world and they see, maybe that they want more and their government has not been able to provide them with more opportunities. Okay? This is the hierarchy of needs. This is basic psychology. We know that, we've looked at people like Dr. Ed Diener from the University of Illinois. He's looked at countries in the entire world. The little white spots are countries where he has not been able to do surveys. So this is Venezuela. Okay, the Venezuelan government, they don't want to let anybody come in and do surveys with their people. The North Korean government, you can't do a survey in North Korea. Okay? So looking at the basic needs of life. Okay? People, food, water, getting enough sleep, having good relationships, feeling physically safe, all of those things. Generally, these are all predictors of subjective well-being. So if people have their basic needs met, if they have others to count on, if they feel respected, Okay? They learn new things, and if they're allowed to use their abilities. Okay? There's a high level of subjective well-being. Okay? Basic needs are met. Okay? There's no particular order in some of those needs, but any ordering leads to subjective well-being. Okay, adaptation. There's been some interesting research on how people adapt to changing circumstances. There was one study that looked at people who are paralyzed. And the initial thinking was that people, even if you have a major accident, you're running around and then you get hit by a car, and then you're in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, that people can learn to be as happy as anything. Okay? Initially, this was thought to be a question of choice or not having a choice. If you have an accident, you don't have a choice. It happened to you. Okay? But in some of the more recent research, okay, there's this sense that people who have had bad things happen to them, that they idealize the past. And while they can be happy, they may never be as happy as they once were. Okay? Lottery winners. Okay, just winning a lot of money all by itself does not guarantee happiness. In fact, when we've studied people who have won many millions of dollars, okay, sometimes their lives are filled with tragedy and with difficulties. Okay. If they learn how to use some of their new resources, I mean, they can have a meaningful life. They can have high subjective well-being. There was a man in Virginia, I believe, who just won the lottery, $200 million in the United States. And he said, I'm going to give part of it to my church. Meaningful life. Okay? I think he couldn't really see how he could spend all that money in his lifetime, and it wouldn't contribute to happiness. But he had this sense of engagement with the community. Okay? We know that people can habituate to lots of money. We don't fully adapt to everything. I'll just quickly show this. This is unemployment. We have a lot of unemployment in the world. Recession. People can have a good level of subjective well-being. They lose their job, okay, and they come back, but they're never quite as happy as they were when they were employed before they lost their job, okay? And there's a sense that our set point, or where we can anchor our sense of happiness, changes when major things happen to us. Okay, so unemployment, if you're a victim of violent crime, we have people with post-traumatic stress disorder, they become very unhappy, sad, they come back, but it's never quite at the same level. Okay? This is losing a spouse. If your spouse dies, or if you have a child who dies. Okay, we know, right? I mean, life satisfaction, okay, it comes back, but it's never quite the same. If you know people who have lost a child. My brother lost his young son, 5 years old. And he was just a little, probably about 15 years ago. And it was a big event for them. They were sad for a long time. They're better now, but they're not ever going to be as happy, I think, as they once were. Okay. Positive affect, being able to show emotion, and negative affect, you think, spite, okay, that does come down. And when I think about people that I know, I think, they do learn to modulate their anger, but they're never quite as happy expressing emotion as they used to be. Physical disability, it kind of depends on the degree of disability. Okay? People do adapt to conditions, but not always, and not completely. Okay? Sometimes these life events cause us to reset our happiness set point, okay, or the range of happiness that we experience. The person-environment fit. I find this one to be interesting, and I'm getting close to the end of my comments here. Think about people, how you match up with your environment. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and it's a very spiritual community. We have many people who go to church. We have many people who go to one church, the LDS church, or the Mormon church, sometimes it's called. But there are people who are not a member of that church that sometimes feel unhappy. Okay, because there's this person-environment fit that doesn't quite match up. Okay? This is a graph that shows the religiosity of countries around the world, all those countries that I showed you. So, countries that fall in the top 25% are here. So individuals with low religiosity, they don't feel as good. They have less subjective well-being than the people who are that have high individual religiosity. Okay? If we look at countries that have low religiosity, in other words, there is not one sort of predominant faith, for example, that they about the same. People with low religiosity and people with high religiosity, they have a good fit. Okay? I think sometimes this works for South Korea's benefit. My sense is that in South Korea, there are many different religions. Correct? Presbyterian, Protestant, Catholic, Buddhist, Confucian, many beliefs. A very diverse society. So I think probably this would be South Korea, that people even who are not religious can feel like they fit in, because there's so much diversity. People are happier when their values and personalities fit the organization. Some of the benefits of being happy are better social relationships, people live longer, higher incomes. There was one study that looked at nuns, okay? And so we looked at nuns back in the 1980s and or so. It was a study that looked at nuns at age 85 in one particular order. And 90% of the most cheerful nuns were still alive. 34% of the least cheerful were still alive. Okay? At age 94, 54% of the most cheerful people were alive. Okay? 11% of the least cheerful were alive still. So, my father is 88 years old. I'd like to tell him jokes. I'd like him to tell me jokes so that he will get to be an old man. Okay? I think he will be, because he seems to have a good sense of humor. Both of these groups lived in the same monastery. They had the same food. They had the same kind of health support and so forth. But outcomes turned out very different for them. One nun had a stroke at age 59, died soon after. One of the people in the study, 98 years old, they were still alive in 2009. Okay? If you're optimistic, okay, in the Netherlands, the top third of men in taking an optimism survey, they had half the heart attacks that the men in the bottom third had. Okay? Big finding. Work by Ed Diener again at the University of Illinois found over many studies, 150 studies, having a sense of high subjective well-being causes health and longevity. Okay? Happier organizations, typically employees, lower healthcare costs, fewer sick days, healthy workers. When I go into a school, when I used to work in schools, I would kind of ask about the absenteeism rates for people, because I wanted to sort of get a sense for, how positive the teachers feel about their work ethic. High absentee rates, trouble. Okay. You think about, does income cause happiness, or does happiness cause high income? This study showed the happier you were, the more money you made. Okay. That's another good reason to be happy.
How about vice versa? How about vice versa?
Vice versa? Not the same. No. Better organizational citizenship. If you have lots of good pro-social behaviors, that leads to better performance, better employee retention, and even customer loyalty. Okay, so employees that have a high sense of subjective well-being are going to be better for the company in the long run also. Okay? Are happy workers productive workers? Generally, yes. Okay? I want to just get to one more thing. Traffic. Sometimes a mark of industrialized societies. Traffic. Okay? And even in Salt Lake City, traffic makes me very unhappy. Okay? But we know that some of the societal influences on life satisfaction, countries or cities where there's a lot of air pollution, lower satisfaction. If you have long commuting distances or traffic jams, very unhappy people. Income equality. Okay, countries that promote income equality and progressive taxation. This is a controversial statement. Okay, many people in the United States would not want to hear this, because we're trying to figure out what's fair taxation for our citizens. But according to the work of Ed Diener and others, typically, this promotes higher levels of subjective well-being, that people perceive a sense of fairness. Okay. Also, countries where there is low corruption, okay, promotes high levels of subjective well-being. Okay. I think in the United States we have questions about immigration, and particularly with Mexico. I think one of the issues that comes up in Mexico is that I think historically there's been a lot of corruption in the government in Mexico. And so sometimes in order to get things done, you have to pay people extra money or pay lots of money to get things done. I think that's one reason why they come to the United States, is that we have lower levels of corruption. Okay, we have other problems, but usually, we're better at catching people who are corrupt. Not always, but usually better. Okay? On that happy note, I'd like to end with the saying, there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. I think I ended my talk last year with this saying. It's something to be thinking about. I want to thank also, if you're interested in learning more about this topic, you have a good computer, go to Google and look up some of the work by Ed Diener, Martin Seligman, and Lynn Johnson, and you will find lots of good resources. Martin Seligman has a nice website where you can look at your own level of subjective well-being. You can take a test and see, where you fall in the comparing yourself to other people in South Korea, even. Okay? On that happy note, I will stop. 55 minutes. That's kind of a long talk, isn't it? So you've been very patient. Happiness is having a professor stop talking, probably. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming and talking to us today. So now there will be time for the Q&A session. And if you didn't receive a piece of paper, you can just raise your hand and our volunteers will give you one. And once you write the questions on the paper, we'll bring them back up and you can ask Daniel. So first of all, somebody wants to know, is there a country you think that has a healthy outlook both domestically and internationally?
Thank you for asking that question. I guess when you look at the literature, the happiest country in the world is Denmark. And you think, well, why Denmark? And my mother was Danish, so I get excited when I get to answer this question. I think the Danes, I guess people have said, well, they have such reasonable expectations. They don't have a lot of high or unrealistic expectations. If you ever go to Denmark, I think they go, well, that's, if I don't have this, that's okay. They also have a good social welfare system. They take care of their older people, which I think is something that, I question how well of a job we do in the United States in taking care of our old people with things like their health and health insurance and having them feel comfortable, getting medical help and so forth.
Is that not Bhutan? Is that not Bhutan? The country of Bhutan?
In Bhutan? I have to go back and look. But I think Denmark is the happiest one. And Bhutan, I think there are maybe certain parts of the culture, where people have a way of understanding, life and even understanding adversity and dealing with some of those challenges.
I wonder, I read about.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. Yeah.
The next question is about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Could you explain the pyramid in terms of capitalist and non-capitalist society and in the views of the individual?
Very good. Somebody with a political science background. I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of... anyway, in the United States, there's a very big discussion now about capitalism and the role of government in providing for people. I think we have some people in the United States that believe that if you give the people too much support in the way of, we have things like food stamps, where we are able to help people out. We don't have health insurance. It becomes very expensive because, only the people that have problems seem to be the ones that we're dealing with. I think for many years, the United States has had a kind of a balance between, I think, if I use the word socialism, no one will shoot me, I hope. Good socialism, I think we've had, and we've had capitalism. And now it seems like some people want the balance to move in the other direction, with more capitalism, that will solve all the problems. I am curious to see how that turns out. I know how I feel about it, and I can share with you my own personal opinion, as I think is a very important role for government and for people to, provide a basic floor of support for things like health, welfare, safety, food, even education. I think education is also a very important value. And I question sometimes in our country if we really value education as much as we should, because we don't really help students with enough support. for them to be able to go to school. Okay? And that has gotten more difficult in the last couple of years. We can't educate people for the future if they're busy, working part-time jobs, if they can't, spend time on their studies, or if we don't have good financial support. And so I would say that in South Korea to you. If I were back in the United States, I would say that to people there too, without reservation. Okay, we have to be careful that we don't lose the safety net for people to improve themselves. I had it when I was a student. When I went to college, I had government support. It was a good government support to pay my tuition, to pay my costs. And so I'm very thankful for that. Now, it's not as strong. So I worry about our students.
Are parents happier than adults who forego children?
Depends on the children. I think, overall, I think people who do have children have a sense of fulfillment in life. That this, adding meaning to your life. When you can help the next generation make progress and to grow up and to be happy. And, I think that's very important for people. If you have a difficult child, or a child that, is rebellious, or, sometimes then you may get more gray hairs as a parent, I think. Parents, they worry a lot about their children, I think, just naturally. And I know people that are still worrying about their children, even though their children are 40 and 50 years old. I think once you're a parent, you always have that bond, with your child. But some children are an easier task than others.
Okay.
Interestingly, I was a difficult task for my parents, surprisingly. So anyway, go ahead.
Okay. And this is our final question of the day. And since we're here at the Quantum International Center, somebody wants to know, what effect does ethnic diversity have on subjective well-being?
I think that's a good question. I think, at least where I work, we value ethnic diversity. I think, because it adds opportunity, to become meaningfully engaged with other people with different backgrounds. I think there are some people who are threatened by ethnic diversity, and they see it, more as someone that's going to affect their status in life. Maybe in the United States, we have certain groups of people that feel like if we have too many people come in from other countries, that they're going to take jobs from American citizens. You may have the same fear in South Korea at times, in terms of ethnic diversity. I think overall, it really, my experience has been that it improves the quality of life for people. If I wasn't interested in ethnic diversity, I would never get to appreciate Korean food. I like Korean food. So from that standpoint, I also like a lot of the Korean values, a lot of the Korean, I think when we learn from other people, opportunities to learn, come with ethnic diversity and cultural diversity.
Thank you very much. So that's the end of our Q&A portion of the talk, and we'd like to thank Daniel again once again for coming in. So let's give him one more round of applause.